Okay, so continuing with our video lessons, okay, today we're going to start remembering about right angle trigonometry. Okay, remember that this topic we already saw it, well, you already saw it on 10th grade, okay, and it's important to review certain topics, certain terms, so that it's easier from this point forward, okay? So, what we have here is right angle trigonometry. Remember that a right triangle, we're talking about a triangle that has at least one of the measurements, because we can't have two, okay, but one of the measurements of the angles is a 90-degree angle, which is the one in the little box in blue. Okay, so that perfect measurement is a right angle measuring exactly 90 degrees, converting this triangle into a right triangle. Okay, so when we're talking about right angle trigonometry, we're going to talk about these trigonometric functions, okay, that are going to help us determine the measurements of the angles and the measurements of the sides of this triangle. Okay, we're going to also use the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, in case you don't remember, the Pythagorean theorem is right here. Okay, the Pythagorean theorem, what it's telling us is that we're going to use, okay, the sides of the the sides of the triangle to find the measurements of the other ones. Okay, now one of these terms is very important. The hypotenuse, which is this side of the right triangle, this hypotenuse has to be this term. Okay, there is no way around it. The hypotenuse needs to be letter C. Okay, because the Pythagorean theorem, what it's telling us is that the measurement of the opposite side and the measurement of the angle side, both to the square and added together, are going to give us the measurement of the hypotenuse. Okay, so this term has to be letter C in the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, now between A and B, we can place adjacent to the A, no problem. And the opposite is going to be letter B, right? Okay, so we're saying that the measurement of this one to the square plus the measurement of this side to the square is going to give us this measurement to the square. Okay, so having these two sides can help us find this one, or having hypotenuse and adjacent can help us find the opposite, or having opposite and hypotenuse is going to help us find the adjacent. Okay, so when we're talking about the measurements of the sides, we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem, okay, because it's going to help us find the side that we're looking for. Okay, now when we're talking about the angles and the measurement of these angles, okay, we can have that this angle, let's say, is 30, okay, and we're going to find that the sine of 30 is going to be a measurement between the trigonometric functions. Okay, the trigonometric functions that we're going to study are sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay, now one word, okay, that I also told 10th grade that they should remember this word, okay, because this word is going to help you a lot, okay, and it's this one. Okay, technically it's not a word, that's why it sounds funny, okay, but we're talking about SOHCAHTOA. Okay, SOHCAHTOA is going to help you remember what side goes with sine, what side goes with cosine, and what side goes with tangent. Let's see why. Okay, look at the first three letters of SOHCAHTOA. It says SOH. Where do you think this comes from? It comes from sine. Look, sine, S, opposite, O, H, hypotenuse. Okay, so this little word can help you remember what goes with sine, what goes with cosine, what goes with tangent. Okay, look at the next three letters of SOHCAHTOA. CAH. Where does it come from? Cosine. Look at the letters. C for cosine, A for adjacent, H for hypotenuse. Okay, so this is where it comes from. Look at tangent. Look at the last three letters of SOHCAHTOA. TOA. Where does it come from? Tangent, O, and A. Okay, so SOHCAHTOA can help you remember sine, opposite hypotenuse, cosine, adjacent hypotenuse, tangent, opposite adjacent. Okay? Now, we don't have a word for cosecant, secant, and cotangent, but look at what happens from each one. Cosecant is the opposite of sine. Look, opposite over hypotenuse, hypotenuse over opposite. You see? It's the opposite. So if you remember sine, you will remember cosecant. Okay? Look at cosine. Adjacent over hypotenuse. Look at secant. Hypotenuse over adjacent. It's the opposite of the cosine. So if you remember cosine, you'll remember that the opposite is the secant. And look at tangent. TOA. Look at the cotangent. Okay? CAO. Okay, so it's the opposite of the tangent. Okay, so if you remember the tangent, you'll remember the cotangent. Okay? Now, these are the trigonometric functions that we're going to use to find either sides or the measurements of the angles. Okay? Okay. Now, today's lesson is only about terms. Okay? This lesson will not have exercises. Just remember the terms that we're talking about. Sine, cosine, tangent. We'll use these trigonometric functions as well as cosecant, secant, and cotangent. We'll use them to find either the measurement of the angles. Remember that this is theta, and this one we use it to find the measurements of angles, or we'll use this to find measurements of sides. Okay, so everything here is important. Okay, sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay, we need to remember which side is adjacent, which side is opposite, which side is hypotenuse. Okay, it's important to remember SOHCAHTOA, sine opposite over hypotenuse, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent opposite over adjacent. And remember the Pythagorean theorem, which is c to the square. This means that this side to the square, like hypotenuse to the square, is the same as adjacent to the square plus the opposite to the square. Okay, so this is how we're going to find the measurement of A, or if we need the measurement of B, or if we need the measurement of C, or with these letters, we're also going to find the cosecant of an angle, the secant of an angle, any measurement that we're looking for with these angles. Okay, because we're talking about right angle trigonometry, and remember, right angle trigonometry means a right triangle that has one right angle. Okay? The trigonometric functions, if you can find in your calculators, okay, we have sine, cosine, and tangent. And if you notice on the top, on the letters on the top, it says sine to the minus 1, cosine to the minus 1, tangent to the minus 1. This is exactly this. Okay? Let me explain where that comes from. Oh, here it is. Okay. Let me erase this ones, and you'll see where they come from. Okay? Sine, okay? On the calculators, if you notice, it says sine to the minus 1. So that means that it's 1 over sine. Okay? And this one is the cosecant. It's 1 over sine. Okay? The cosine, okay, says cosine to the minus 1. So that means that it's 1 over cosine, and this one is secant of theta. Tangent says tangent to the minus 1, so that means that it's 1 over tangent, and that is the cotangent. Okay? Now, why do we flip the terms in the cosecant when we're talking about just opposite over hypotenuse? Okay, because remember that here, I'm going to erase this one. Okay, we said that the cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Okay, so let's think about if we place the normal sign, which would be 1 over opposite over hypotenuse. How do we simplify these fractions? Okay, remember the rule for fractions? The top with the bottom and the ones in the middle. Okay, so 1 over hypotenuse and 1 times opposite. So we flip them. That's why we flip them, because it's 1 over sine, and the definition of sine is opposite over hypotenuse, and when we divide it in the fraction 1 over 1, the hypotenuse goes first and the opposite goes second. The same thing happens with the other one. Look at 1 over cosine. What is 1 over cosine? 1 over, what is cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, what happens when we simplify these fractions? We flip them. Hypotenuse over adjacent. The same thing happens with cotangent. Look, 1 over tangent. Okay, what is tangent? 1 over, okay, opposite over adjacent. Okay, when we flip the fractions, we have it that it's adjacent over opposite. So that's where these come from. Okay, they come from the opposite of those. That's why in the calculator, we don't have secant, we don't have cosecant, we don't have cotangent. What we have is sine to the minus 1, cosine to the minus 1, tangent to the minus 1. So that means exactly this. Okay, so if we use the second function in our calculators for tangent, we're finding the cotangent. If we use the second function for cosine, we're using the secant. Okay, and if we're using the second function for sine, we're using the cosecant. Okay? Okay. So if you have any questions about these terms, please let me know. Okay, this lesson will not have exercises. Okay? So make sure to check out the next lesson, which will have some exercises. We'll put this information, formulas, and terms into practice.